Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Gold Leaf Frame Makers. My name's David Horowitz. This is my shop. This is where I grew up. My father started this business in 1988, and I work here with a lot of the people that have worked here for decades. I'd like to thank Kevin Rowe and Rich Reisel for putting us all together here tonight. They figured that this would be a lot of fun for you guys. I'd also like to apologize, we were trying to live stream this for you tonight, but we figured that you get a much better picture if we took our time here, put this together, and released it for you. Little history about Gold Leaf Frame Makers. Like I said, it was established in '88. It existed in New York City before then, but moved here in the late '80s and set up shop. And we've been framing for all the galleries here, but we also wholesale to both clients and frame shops across the whole country. All 50 states you can go into a frame shop and find some of our corner samples. Or now that you know me, you can email me and call me on the phone and we'll set you up directly. What we do here at Gold Leaf Frame Makers is we make historic replication frames, and we do it by period. What I mean by historic replication frames is that no matter what period we're talking about, we try to copy the originals as closely as we can. So you can see here in the Italian section, we have frames that look like they were just made if they were really well kept. Or we have frames that look like they hung next to a fireplace for 100 years. First we start with profile, then we match the carve, and then we match the patina. And the patina varies on the history of the frame and what it went through in its life. So we are imagining the story of all of these frames. And we match that to what we imagine the painting went through in its lifetime. Where it's been, how well it was cared for, and where it finds itself nowadays. So as you see we have this all set up and split up, whether it's American frames, modernist frames behind me now, or the American Impressionist frames behind that. I'm going to break down some styles for you, and then we're going to put some frame samples on some paintings so you can see how we actually use them when it comes to design. And then I'm going to take you in the back and show you how it's made. I got a couple of our friends back there waiting to do a carving and gilding demo. So I'm going to go break down a few styles basically for you, and I guess we'll start there. First frame is the Italian cassetta frame here. This is credited with being the father of all frames. This is originally what would frame out a nicho in a church. But in the 14th century, those frames came off the wall and were taken into people's homes. As things became less clerical and more secular, people wanted portraits of themselves hanging in their castle, not just portraits of their, religious. Cassetta frame, very simple, high back, low front, and a flat panel in between. Many variations you'll see of that, and this is very classical Italian. This frame here, as you can see, has the same profile, right? High back, low front, and a little flat in between. This is what's known as a Carlo Maratti frame, or a Rosa frame. And you can tell by the design here, this is indicative of this style. Here's another cassetta frame for you, with different ornamentation. In the corner, this is called sgraffito. This means scratched away in Italian. And this frame has been gilded, then it's been painted black. Then it's gone through with a nail, and the design is scratched back to show the gold underneath it. And so there's that beautiful sgraffito center and beautiful sgraffito corner. Again, this is all hand-drawn here. And this design was pulled out of a book we found of antique Italian frames. We'll delve in and research frame auctions, and there's different frame historians who've written different books about it. And that's a lovely thing about picture framers, too, is that one person's frame is another person's frame, as long as you can make it. This frame here is it's a cassetta frame. It's just backwards. The other ones had the high back and the low nose. This has the high nose and the low back, but it's an easy modification. You're literally just flipping the wood around. This one here has another Italian technique called pistiglia, and let's see if we can see how that's actually raised up off the panel of the frame. It's a mixture of honey with our gesso that we use to make it extra hard so that it withstands the gesso on top of it. And these are all just little variations on your classic Italian frame. Now, a lot of Spanish frames and Italian frames look very similar to people. They were sharing the same trade routes for centuries and the same artisans, very close in proximity. You get different colors and tone that we play with around here, but a lot of the time it is difficult to tell the difference. Not when you're looking at something like this, which is very European Spanish frame. Now, you can see it's continuously carved all over, beautiful flow, the way that the carve goes throughout it. I wanted to bring this up because we're in North America here, and I know in our region, and in California too, we see a lot of Spanish colonial art coming up. I wanted to just show the difference between a European Spanish frame and a Peruvian or Bolivian Spanish colonial frame. So when they were colonizing South America, they were trying to build all those big, beautiful cathedrals and stuff too. So what you would have is you'd have some masters from the old world teaching new people how to carve. So a lot of stuff that's indicative of a Spanish colonial frame, you'll see more simplified carves that are more repetitive. You can see that they're balanced out by some other interesting stuff, the holes, the negative space and everything. So it's just kind of a different, more simplicity in style. Plus you see this leaf shape up here is very much Cusco. These guys were having to train teams of people to carve these cathedrals and train them fast. And what we do back here is we have our master carver, and when somebody's learning how to carve, we'll start them on a Cusco frame. Or any sort of Peruvian frame. Because it's simple and you get one chisel, one stroke, and then you really get the whole frame down. We've got a Spanish frame on the table back there that we'll be seeing carved in here in a minute. All right, so we're in France. So French frames. Again, these are just very quick overviews. And this is for frame identification purposes, and this will give you a gist of what you're looking at. So if you got a frame that, what is this frame? Or if you're trying to identify a piece of art too, and the frame looks original, it can help you with that as well. France is so many centuries of different frame making, but there are some basics here. This frame here with this exterior floral carve, that's a Louis XIII frame. Anytime you see a carve in the corner like that, it's Louis XIII. Next door we got Louis XIV. Louis XIV, what's indicative of Louis XIV is this continuous carve that runs throughout the whole frame. And you see here it's got the corners, the centers, and the straight rail happening. Louis XV was the most elaborate and ornate of all of the French frames. And that's it because of the sweeps here. You see the way it sweeps in between the corners and the centers? That's truly a Louis XV frame. Okay, now Louis XV frame, that's much simpler. You'll see this frame all the time. Little bead on the sight edge. This here we got a little long bead, 3 short beads. We're actually crazy enough around here to hand carve all those little beads. So they meet up so nice in the corner right there. Yeah, obviously there's a lot more happening in Europe than just this basic overview. A lot more happening with your Louis and your English frames and stuff too. But we got to keep moving here tonight. And I'm going to talk to you now about how European frames became American frames. So when American frames started, when America became America after they were England, they didn't really have their own style developed yet. And a lot of the country was really reliant on importers and frames coming in from Europe through the East Coast. So let's talk early American frames, 1840s and onwards. So American frames, early American frames, early 19th century. There was a bunch of naturalism and stuff going on. So like this frame up here, you're seeing is an American Cove frame. And this has very American looking wheat in the corner. This is actually a really fun replication that we had made for our friend Kevin Rowe, who got us here tonight. And as I wanted to show this as a great example of an early American frame. Again, you see a lot of like leaf motifs, and a lot of these early American frames have sort of like a river stone panel and stuff like that too. Now this is really a Louis XVI frame. It's got the simplicity, not as simple as just the bead, but you can see the string of pearls there, this ornamentation here. and it has a lamb's tongue on the nose. But this is actually very American in the sense that it has the wheat. There's also different materials, of course, in America versus Europe. So a lot of times the American frames have a gray bowl as opposed to a red bowl like you'd find out of France. But, you know, that can all vary from time to time. So this frame that you see here, this frame is indicative of the Hudson River School. And that's because of the fluted cove. So now we made it, you know, to the mid-19th century here. Hudson River School loved these grandiose frames. But again, these were European frames that they were pulling in that had become indicative to American styles. This part of the history of frames marks kind of a turning point too. What you're seeing in these flutes and you're seeing in this laurel leaf that's on the outside, this is cast composition, as was the previous frame. Now the French had started casting composition long before the Industrial Revolution, but what happened is machines started to become more prevalent by the late 19th century, and they started casting these things en masse. And a lot of times you'll find frames from this era and they're just falling apart because people had lost the ability to make a solid frame, but they had gained the ability to make these frames really quickly. So there's a lot from this period that can't even be restored. These frames that we make here, we actually have sourced this molding from a centuries-old factory in France that knows how to make composition proper. People started casting them in plaster and all sorts of stuff. 100 years after that, they started casting them in resin, and those ones actually kind of have a better chance of standing up. But you get all sorts of foam and weird materials if you're used to looking at frames like this. So later in the century, artists started to have a more prominent take on their frames, and they started to move us towards what we really know as American frames. So by the late 19th century, we started to have frames that we attribute to specific artists. At the top here, this is a Sully frame. He was very specific about the style of frames that he had on his artwork. And below that is a Whistler frame. And Whistler actually was one of the first frame makers to sign his frames. He'd engrave a little butterfly on it. So this is when we start to attribute frames to both the artists that made them, not just the period or century that they come from. That's really big when we get over to these American frames. Right around the turn of the 20th century, when artists started really taking control over their own frames, we can find those frames now that are attributed to those specific artists. Like this frame here that you see is attributed to Irving Kaus, one of the Taoist founders. And we know that because he was very specific. He drew them out and he had them carved on the East Coast. Different frames that you see around it, we attribute to different American manufacturers by name. It's Gene Woolsey Frames or Newcomb Macklin Company. And this is when American frames really became American frames and the American Impressionists and the avant-garde. This is when they started to take on a different life of their own. Everything was done by hand. They weren't as deep and they were a little, looser. I know you guys are all out in California and we've got some different California frames around here too. But things were a lot of ways simpler and flatter. But what you can see was happening here in these crazy frames is they're just pulling from history, much like we are today. Now, there's a lot of frames that, in this format, we could go on forever getting into this style or that style. But I think we're going to keep it at basically European to American frames. I'm going to show you how we make them, and then I'm going to show you how we use them on the easel. So if you follow me now, we're going to go into the wood shop, find Roland and Cassidy, who stayed late here tonight to give you guys a demonstration. So, and if you don't believe that we can gild anything, you just look around at this artwork here. This is all my father's artwork. His little office and gallery here. This is all my dad's artwork. He's really, really missed around this place. He just passed away earlier this year. This is the gilding room.
We'll be back here in 1 minute so Cassidy can give you a gilding and burnishing demonstration. But first I want to take you into the wood shop itself so we can start where the frames start, in raw wood. Let's go find Roland. It's a hand-carved frame. Lots of people, I was talking about cast frames earlier, a lot of people use CNC machines or follow me router machines to give them a head start when it comes to carving a frame, but not here. Here we have Roland Ostheim, master carver. He's been with the company since 2004. Hey, Roland.
How are you?
And this frame here, this one we actually milled just out of a block of basswood. Bass is what we use for all our frames. It's got a consistent grain pattern. It's a hardwood, but it's still relatively soft. And this was kind of a modification of an existing frame that we had. We didn't have any stock profile to do it on, so this was just a beam of wood last week. Right now it's been shaped, and Roland started to draw out the corners and started to carve the corners. It's like a turn of the 20th century American Impressionist carve. It's got a continuous leaf design on the outside and a fleur-de-lis in the corners. You can see there's the corner samples in the middle of that frame right there. So these are what we work from. Same stuff that's hanging out in the showroom. And Roland really took not just carving frames for us to a new level, but is probably one of the best picture frame carvers known in the history of picture frames. So. But we do sign the back of our frames here at Gold Leaf. If you get a frame from us and you look at the back, it'll say GLF 88, the year that we were founded, and then now we're signing them all with a 20. And if Roland did it for you, it's got an RO on the back, or maybe one of his apprentices did it there for you too. Carve that thing.
Jelly? Let's.
So right now he's like stamping out the outside of this continuous leaf.
I'm doing a down cut.
Down cut.
Drawings here. And I'll go through and do the whole leg, and then I'll start diving into each cut.
See, when he started on that corner too, all the wood was that high. You know, that's not an applique. There was nothing inset in there to carve. It's all been carved back around it, those dive cuts. Let's see, how long do we figure a frame like this will take to carve? That's what everybody always asks. How long does how long does this madness take?
This is the first time I've carved this frame. So it took a few hours yesterday to figure out the corners. So I did that corner yesterday and all of this today. So probably 3 days, I'd say.
3 8-hour days.
Yeah.
So this is one of the major factors too, when people ask what a frame costs, why it costs, what it costs. Because sometimes it's width. This is a 4-inch frame and it's all gold, so it's different than a 4-inch frame with a gold panel. But also, you have to factor in the amount of rolling time. Also, too, in production, people, the other question they always ask is, what does it cost and how long is it going to take for me to get it? I always try to explain to people the queue, which is like, there's one Roland that can make a card like this. We happen to have 10 cards in the house that need his expertise. Well, that's 30 days before we can get started on it.
So here's another example of a frame that Roland's been working on. And this side here too, you see the rough mill. You can see how it's been shaped out using our machines, and then what it looks like once the carve's happening. We touched on a European Spanish frame earlier today, so I hope you all recognize this carve here. The same continuous nature and the swooping design. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We got the blocky side here and the hand milled out smooth side here. Drawing.
Well, thank you, Roland. Hey, so after the frame is carved, there's still a lot more preparation that needs to be done before we can gild it. Of course, you can't be putting gold directly onto wood, so we have to make the gesso. I'll walk you through the shop this way so you can see a bit more of the process here. This is our table saw, the real workhorse of the factory. And you can see there's a whole stack of, these are actually hardwood cherry flat band frames, which Cassidy's going to be gilding one of those for you in a second. We have frames everywhere. Yeah, this short rack of molding is a good representation of all the different stock profiles we have here. These are most of them milled in Los Angeles, although we do a decent amount of milling here ourselves for custom frames. Every time that we need to expand a frame or shrink a frame, like Roland's frame back over there that we had to make wider than our corner sample, then we have to mill it ourselves. But ahead of me here, this is our kitchen. And we make gesso the same way that they've been making gesso for hundreds of years. In this bucket here, this is calcium carbonate. It's like chalk, it's marble dust. It's very soft. If you were in the shop here, I'd have you feel it. Very soft and smooth. And we just do a mixture of that and rabbit skin glue, and we apply it to the frame to get our gesso coating. These are various hot pots and stuff too, which is where we cook our clay. You check out this jar right here. This is a jar of mud, actually, because the glue hasn't been added, but that's where red clay comes from. So again, mix the mud with the glue and apply that to the frame, and it's ready to gild. Now, of course, there's a lot of sanding that happens in between, although it's a bit more fun to watch Roland carve a frame than it is to watch any of our other crew members sand a frame. Doesn't really translate to video so well, but they go over everything with a fine-tooth comb, finest sandpaper, raking light to get that surface absolutely perfect and get it ready to do the water gilding. So back into the water gilding room. We found Cassidy in here. So this is what we spent all that time in preparation for in the back. Finally, we made it to the part where the water gilding happens. We have we have our esteemed gilder over here, Cassidy Fernandez, who's going to be gilding a flat band for you. So the way it works is just how it sounds. She's going to, cut the gold. You can go ahead and cut the gold to the size that we're going to need here. And she's applying water to the surface of the frame. Now this is the bowl, the red surface here. And what that's doing is that's reactivating the glue, both in the clay and the gesso and everything beneath it that we built up there to this point. And a leaf is laid. So you can see here the leaf that she's using. They're all 3 1/8 by 3 1/8. Standard leaf pattern. That's why when you know it's really a real frame when you can see the ley lines that overlap. Now right now, you can see that she's overlapping those two. You're not really going to see it, but the next step that she's going to demonstrate for us is burnishing. And that's when you can really start to see those lines. If you're not sure if your frame is really gold or not, look for those lines. They'll be about 3 inches apart. If they're wider than that, it's metal leaf. If they look fake, then it's metal leaf and somebody painted lines on it. Which is definitely something that people do, so don't be fooled by any imitation gold. This frame is a contemporary flat band profile. This one we're just going to gild once. A lot of our modernist frames and stuff too, we actually gild 2 times. Because we'll go back tomorrow and patch in any little misses that might occur, little little tears in the gold. But when we're doing something like this, it's just going to have that perfectly clean, high shine finish. Everything needs to be done perfectly. That brush she's using is called a gilder's tip. Not that, actually. Never mind. That brush she's using right there is called a mop, and she's mopping out the water. The brush in her hand now that is actually used to pull the gold from the book, that's called a gilder's tip. And that one's made out of squirrel hair. This too, you may have seen people gild before. You see they have a big leather suede pad and a long, weird bread knife looking thing and a little wind guard and all this stuff. That's the really old school traditional way of gilding. Pulling it right from the book, as she's doing here, is a New York style production gilding. There's no mess, there's no fuss. She's just doing what needs to be done and getting this frame gilded. Because we make about 400 frames a year here at Gold Leaf, and we can't take too much time. Got to be efficient. To Now see how well Cassidy does is I make her laugh with my commentary of her gilding. Look at that. Perfect. Under pressure.
Talk about how thin the gold is.
The gold is so thin you would not believe. The gold is 250 thousandths of an inch thin. It's so thin it's basically translucent. I mean, even if we don't abrade the gold for the patina, you can still get a sense of the color that's underneath it because it's pounded so thin. That's why we use 22 karat gold here as opposed to 24 karat gold, because it's a little bit of added copper that allows it to stay together. If you have 24 karat gold, the gold needs to be so thick to maintain its integrity that it's actually very difficult to do what we're doing here. Coming into the corner, the hardest part of a frame. The flat band's a little straightforward, but some of these profiles get real tricky. One little square to finish it off there. I calculated if you stacked gold leaf to my height, you'd have $10 million worth of gold leaf. Don't dip your microphone in the liquor there.
Trying not to. That's what the windshield is for.
Yay!
The liquor
Yay!
Sweet.
Whole side of the frame together. Now burnish! We have so much fun here at Gold Leaf. Now's the part where the real magic happens, when we burnish the frame. What water gilding has afforded us by making that surface so perfect, and now that the water has evaporated out from underneath it, leaving no glue residue or anything like that, we're able to take these polished agate stones and actually rub them upon the surface of the frame and make it shine like a mirror. Here, Cassie's going to demonstrate.
Should I go across or just do like a thick section?
Just do a thick section so we can see it. This is white gold. This is 12 karat gold. We were just talking about carats. This is, a 12 karat gold. We like that. It's got a nice combination of silver and gold carats, so it's warm enough. Now you can see frames they gild with all sorts of carats, 16 karat, 18 karat lemon gold, up to the 22 karat, which is the really common traditional 22, 23 karat, which gives you that yellow gold. You get a good shot on that shine there? Now this frame, because it's modernist, and it's got our high shine modernist finish on it, we're actually going to go over the entire frame with this agate. Then we're going to gild it again, and then go over the entire frame with an agate again. It's the only way to ensure that you get that perfect mirrored surface. But this is a crucial step. This frame happens to be all burnished because of the style of it. But picking up the highs and the lows with different shiny and matte portions of a profile is key in giving it some visual articulation. Because a raw gold frame is just a raw gold frame. You can't even see what's happening there. But once we do these certain techniques, the frame really starts to have its due depth. Look at that white gold shine. Thanks, Cassie.
You're welcome.
And there you go. Carved frame, gilded frame. The patina process, that'll have to be another video. But the important question here is, what do we do with those frames? Because if you don't put the right frame on the right painting, it doesn't really matter anyway. So I have this great piece here. This is Myers, compliments of the Zeppelin Lampert Gallery here in town. And they let me use this painting. And I'm actually non-scriptedly recapturing what happened with me in the gallery earlier today. This painting was brought to me, and we started to look at frames for it. Now my client, he grabbed this frame here. This is a 3-inch, 22-karat Percy Gray carve. Now Percy Gray was a California watercolorist. That's where I got the frame from. So I said, okay, well this frame is nice. One thing though, it's not as Western as this painting, right? It's California. And it's also, you know, wouldn't you like a little more Southwestern flair? So I took here what the same profile is with a different carve, and I put that up there. Now this is a carve that we took off of a Burt Phillips painting, and it's got an arrow in the corner of it. And he said, oh, well that carve does look nice. It looks a little bit more Western. But then he pulled this one off the shelf, off the wall. Now this frame looked a little too traditional for us. Now you can see that we're all in agreement here. The first thing that we went to was a 3-inch frame, and we stuck with the 3-inch frame the whole time because him being a good gallery owner and frame designer, and me being right there with him on the frame design, we know that the size of this painting needs a 3-inch frame. So I said that frame does look nice. And I proposed another carve for him on the same profile with just a slightly looser, more impressionistic carve. And we both decided that that frame there on the right is the way to go for this painting. Now again, this was just this morning, so we go from size to profile, and then we hone in the carve. And here we offer all of these choices. I mean, the first 2 profiles and this profile here. I've got 3 more carves that we could look at on this profile here, but you can only look at so many corner samples. They ask, how do you do this remotely? Well, fortunately, now that we've been introduced, all you have to do is send me an email to goldleafsantafe@gmail.com, and we can do this via Photoshop and send them back to you. And it's just that easy. We'll give you 3 or 4 choices, and we'll make sure that we find the right frame for the right painting. So this is an example of how we use everything that we did back there. Because a lot of people, when it comes down to it, you know, we don't want to be grabbing a Louis XIII frame. We don't want to be grabbing an Italian frame to be putting on this painting here. So stylistically, period-wise, it's all correct. And it looks great because it's all correct. And I guess that's about all we got for tonight. It's getting late over here. Making a movie takes time. It's still a Thursday night. We all got to be back here carving frames and gilding frames in the morning. I did really enjoy this opportunity, though. I hope that I can get to, you know, meet every one of you individually someday. That would be fantastic. But we will be having our question and answer shortly from now. Me and Rich are deciding on when. And once we do, I invite you all to come in and ask me to clarify or expound upon any of this, because I know we blew through 700 years of frame history, and I don't know how many minutes this is going to turn out to be, but it's just a little snippet of what we do here at Gold Leaf, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to share this with all of you. Again, I hope to speak to every one of you very soon. Thank you so much for coming here tonight.